Hello and welcome to the Face of Pro-Life. Today I am speaking with the co-founder of K.I.D.S, Keeping Infants with Down Syndrome, Leticia Velasquez. Thank you for joining us today, Leticia.
It's my pleasure.
So last month, this is February now, but last month you and your family went down to Washington, D.C. for the March for Life.
That's right.
And I heard you had a lot of really exciting, interesting experiences. And I thought you could share some of those with our audience.
I certainly did. Yeah, I brought all three girls, Gabriella 17, Isabella 13, my little girl with Down syndrome, Christina 8, to share with us our third year as our kids marched for life down in Washington, D.C.
So I should step back and introduce K.I.D.S, the organization. Tell us a little bit about K.I.D.S and what you hope to accomplish with this organization.
My friend Eileen Haupt from Vermont and I met online. I have a blog, Face of, it's called Cause of Our Joy, and she has a daughter with Down syndrome, and we said there ought to be a group at the March for Life representing the targeted group, the most targeted group by abortion, and the group that has no voice. So we want our children who are alive to stand for those children, and the parents to stand for those children, those 92% of children with Down syndrome that are aborted. Not 92% of all children, but that 92% of children that are diagnosed with Down syndrome. And this is about to go up because new prenatal tests have been discovered in Hong Kong, which within 10 years, which will probably be universally introduced to all pregnant women, bringing the levels of abortion way, way up. Wow. I mean, children with Down syndrome are very much in danger of being extinct from society. So this is an imminent danger to our children. So the time to act is now. We felt as an urgency, so we formed this group 3 years ago. We found a great response within the community. We've gotten a great response in the media, and we do our best to attract media so that we can spread the message. And this year we were blessed. Earlier this year, in November, we did an interview for EWTN, which hasn't aired yet, on the show called Faith and Culture with Colleen Carroll Campbell. She interviewed Eileen Haupt and I over in St. Louis at the Cardinal Regali Center, and we had a wonderful conversation, which will be aired sometime this spring, and we'll be sure to let our listeners know. In the meantime, I met the producer of EWTN who asked if we would be interviewed at the March for Life.
Oh, great.
Because he heard us describe the fact that March for Life is a great part of our ministry.
Sure.
That's basically what we do, is we go to the March for Life to call attention. He said, would you please come to Teresa Tomeo's tent where she does the interviews, and we'll include you as one of the groups that we focus on during the March for Life.
And I have to say, I did see your interview live.
Great. Thank
as
you.
I was watching the coverage on the television on EWTN.
Terrific. And poor Eileen Haupt wasn't feeling well, so I brought my dear friend Dr. Judy Mascolo, who's a pro-life physician that's very well known in Connecticut. She speaks publicly throughout the state about how her practice was influenced by her daughter, also named Christina Ann, a couple years older than my daughter, but they could pass for sisters. And her daughter made her from a typical family physician to a pro-life family physician. Her daughter changed her life in the way that my Christina made me very active in the media. So they changed our lives.
It's amazing that there's actually organizations like March for Dimes that would have no problem with Down syndrome children being extinct.
I don't understand it.
I mean, that's pretty much their mission, is to identify prenatally birth defects and to target these children. And like you said, 92% of children that are identified as Down syndrome in utero are terminated. And
this comes from Dr. Brian Skotko of Harvard Medical School, so this is definitely a documented statistic.
Right. And you can probably attest to that there is a lot of pressure for a woman not only to get the diagnosis, because any woman over 34 knows that you're going to get pressure to get amniocentesis.
That's the first thing they think about.
Yeah.
As if something magically happens between 34 and 35. Right. And oddly enough, most children with Down syndrome are born to mothers younger than 35, simply because statistically
they weren't pre-diagnosed.
They weren't pre-diagnosed, and also they have more children.
Yeah.
I mean, even though women are having children later and later, these women always still have more children. So they think it can happen to them because statistically it is more common in older women. But now with this new blood test, we're likely to have universal testing, just as we have the triple screen that every woman goes through. This is a test which can detect fetal DNA in the maternal bloodstream.
Wow.
So it's non-invasive. There's no perceived risk to the mother at this point. And right now it's expensive, but you know that science can make things inexpensive. So
well, yeah,
there'll
especially
be a great
if they're
pressure.
going to get volume. If they're going to get work for volume, you know, if every pregnant woman gets this test, then they can lower the price considerably.
And they see a child with disabilities that's expensive to
Right.
society. So they'll, especially in countries with socialized medicine, there'll be great pressure, especially a country like China, which is great pressure on women to abort anyway if they have more than one child. So coming from
Do we
China
not see
makes
how
me very
ludicrous
nervous.
this is? I mean, what if we said, well, you know, we do not want kids that are going to have cancer.
Yeah.
You know,
Pretty
if they
soon
can
we'll be able to tell
that.
diabetes, cancer. Right now they're very close.
Diabetes, that'd be a really good one.
I'd be in trouble.
Autism.
They're very close
You
to
know?
looking at genetic markers for autism. For cystic fibrosis, they're looking at genetic markers for a lot of different diseases, okay? So pretty soon there will be, and unfortunately, Autism Speaks helps pay for this research. So if you give money to this organization, you're actually helping them to find the genetic markers that will make, instead of helping these children. And what this ends up doing is you find the genetic markers, these children are aborted, and the research stops. For decades, there was very little research done to help children with Down syndrome. The NIH doesn't spend anything. In fact, until parents put pressure, they weren't even interested in finding a cure for Down syndrome. Now, thanks to our friends in Washington, we're going to show you in a couple of film clips.
Yeah, why don't you show us some of the,
Yes,
I know you had
absolutely.
taken some photos of your experience in Washington, D.C.
Sure.
So you set us up. What are we going to be seeing?
Okay, well, the first clip is my friend, my daughter Isabella, holding Christina, that's little Christine, and the pink cat that says March for Life, and Allegra Rose, starting off the March for Life.
So
And
that was just when you first
that was
started
when we
out
first
walking.
started out, right? See this lovely picture here? That was not us. It was another family from Wisconsin that always marches with this. The children designed this. Yeah, isn't this beautiful? It's Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. This lovely couple from Holy Family Parish with 5 kids. They took a picture of their daughter and they marched with that poster. We managed to find them through posting that National Right to Life News. I posted an article and they came forward and said, that's our picture. Now, this is the kids group at the National Right to Life Committee headquarters. I don't know if you can see, but in the middle there in the pink dress is Kathy McMorris Rogers. She's the congressman from Washington State with a son named Cole. Now, Cole is in preschool now. He couldn't join us. He had to go to school that day. But Cole has Down syndrome and has been her reason for starting the Down Syndrome Caucus. She's been a wonderful friend to us. First we met her in her office, and now she comes to us.
Wow.
And she made us a priority after visiting President Obama. She's head of the Armed Services Families Committee, and we were on the agenda right after that.
Awesome.
So she really thinks it's very important to come meet us. So she met with the families. We also met with a group called the Order of the Alhambra, which it refers to a Catholic group of young men who wear the fez, and they're from Catholic University, but they have chapters all over. They call them caravans. And they specialize in helping children with intellectual disabilities.
Wow.
So they were also present in our group. See the gentlemen in the back with the fezzes on their heads. Yeah, that what they specialize in. So they had me write an article for their paper. They joined us last year, and they always give support to this organization. That this is what they were formed to do.
So are you finding your group growing and growing?
It's growing. We even had a group in San Diego that participated in the Marches for Life take place all over the country.
Right.
Not everything's in Washington. There's a very big March for Life over in now San Francisco. I believe they've gotten up to 50,000.
Yeah.
I don't know how many they had in San Diego, but they asked to use our logo. I'm like, go ahead. We don't copyright it. Put on a T-shirt. See, we can't wear T-shirts in Washington. No one would ever see them. So we put them on a button, and we wear these blue and yellow scarves. We do the best we can. But people are very interested in spreading the word, and it touches a lot of hearts because people their hearts have been breaking about this.
Oh, sure.
And once they hear of the tragedy, even people who formerly didn't even know about this are just heartbroken about this, because no one's looking to help these children. They're only looking to eliminate them. And as this happens to other diseases, we'll find that the progress will stop in helping them. Now imagine we did this to children with polio back in the 30s. We didn't have the ability. But since the ability came along for amniocentesis and karyotyping, prenatal diagnosis, in the late 60s, that was seen as the answer to the problem.
Right.
Unfortunately, it was a sense of timing. If we had found the cure at the same time as we found the cause, then right now we're finding wonderful things that are happening. Dr. Legeune, who developed who saw what caused Down syndrome, he was able to see links to cancer, links to Alzheimer's that are proving true right now. And that the Alzheimer's Foundation and the National Cancer Institute are paying for some of the Down syndrome research because there may be cures within the Down syndrome research. In other words, we've located on the 21st chromosome factors which influence brain degeneration and feeding of cancerous tumors. Now, before mapping the human genome a few years ago, that would not have been possible. So things are starting to turn the corner. Now, we only have 10 years before that test becomes widely available. So it's a race for the cure. But I wanted to share with you a small clip of introducing Kathy McMorris-Rodgers, the Congresswoman from Washington, to Valerie Guillou. Valerie and her husband have lived in the United States for 22 years. They're a French couple with 5 kids, the youngest of which has Down syndrome. And Valerie and her husband, Jean-Marc, work the foundation Legeune. That is Dr. Legeune's foundation. And Valerie is giving Kathy McMorris-Rodgers a copy of the book, Life is a Blessing. It's an absolutely wonderful book. I recommend anybody.
Now, did she write this?
No, Clara Lejeune-Guimard wrote it, one of the daughters. Dr. Lejeune had 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys, and she wrote it as a memoir to her daughter, who was born a couple of weeks after her father died in 1994. She said, "He was such a wonderful man. I want my daughter to know him, and I don't want her to grow up without knowing him." So in this next clip, you will see that this lady is giving the book to Kathy McMorris-Rodgers, who'd never heard of Dr. Legeune, and will be learning about his great legacy. This is us walking from the EWTN interview. I was interviewed about this Christina being helped by her sister. There she is. And here we are. There's Christina on the floor. Here we are at the National Right to Life Center, and Kathy McMorris-Rodgers had just given birth to a baby girl. So she has 2 children. This is Valerie Guillou introducing Dr. Legeune's book, Life's a Blessing. It's recently been re-released by the National Catholic Bioethics Center, who will be making some of the money. It's a wonderful memoir. It's very easy reading. It's not scientific at all. But it gives you the idea of a man who's actually a servant of God. He's actually up for sainthood because of the remarkable bravery he showed as a scientist to stand up for life.
Wow.
He actually stood.
Which isn't that easy anymore.
It wasn't easy then. Let me tell you, that was the 1960s. Okay, this is when abortion was being legalized, and he said, if the Catholic Church ever became for abortion, I would no longer be a Catholic because as a scientist, I know that life begins at conception. Every single gene is in place, and as a scientist, I would be dishonest to say anything else. So he told this in front of the U.S. Senate. He told us in Parliament in France. He told us on French TV, and he told us in front of the UN.
Maybe you should have told it in front of the Supreme Court.
Well, I think that's the only place he missed. But believe me, if they didn't hear that, they had to be deaf, because he wrote his wife every night that he was gone. Every night he wrote birth to his wife. He was very devoted. And he said the night that he spoke in front of the UN about the right to life and the fact that a human embryo was human from the very moment of its existence, I lost my Nobel Prize. Now, the man who discovered a disease should have gotten a Nobel Prize. John F. Kennedy gave him a prize. John Allen Memorial Award, the highest award in genetics.
You're right.
And no Nobel Prize. You know, we know people who have got Nobel Prizes for absolutely nothing. Now, here this man discovers a disease. And what really broke his heart is not only did he not find the cure, he spent his whole life trying to find the cure, but that his discovery of trisomy 21 actually led to the death of millions of children with Down syndrome. So one day,
instead of being used to help find a cure, it was used to hunt and destroy.
It was his worst nightmare.
Yeah.
It was his absolute worst nightmare.
It's too bad that he lived long enough to see it being used that way.
So we count on his prayers now that he's the servant of God to move the Legeune Foundation along. They're moving to the United States. Well, they're not moving from France, but they're opening up an office in Virginia with the Tepeyac Family Center. And they will work with them to help fund the 91 research projects that they have going in the United States. And I would advise anybody to give to the Legeune Foundation because they do not do embryonic research. They check their scientists. None of their scientists ever use anything that's against
And there's not too many
Catholic
organizations
teaching.
that can say that anymore.
Not any Down syndrome organizations. There are scientists whose work I admire very much that are not using that are not using embryonic stem cells. However, they were asked if in the Cold Spring Harbor lab, a doctor was asked, "Would you use them?" And he said yes. So he's not using them at the moment, and you and I know that they're useless. They've not produced a single cure. But if he had an opportunity, he would. And that just really made me very disheartened.
Right.
Because he has asked me to get the Catholic Church behind him.
I don't think so.
Well, as long as he's not using them at the moment, they can say conditionally, all right, you're doing a good work, because he does have a drug that maybe within 9 years can make our children think normally like a normal child and remember, which is a wonderful thing simply because it reduces the abortion rate. That was Dr. Legeune's concern. Not because these children weren't good enough, because, because they would be aborted.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing the march. We're seeing all the thousands, hundreds of thousands. I heard about 350,000 very enthusiastic young people.
And the operative word is young, because people are getting younger and younger at the
I
march.
know. I'm starting to feel like the grandma there. When I was going in the 70s, to be young, you were patted on the back.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, look, we have a young person here. Now it's like, everybody's young. And it's not just because it's a day off school. It's because these children realize they survived, that they were very lucky.
Well, the funny thing, too, is that the Newsweek and some of the other news organizations, if they cover the March for Life, they still say that, it's a bunch of old retirees marching on the march.
I remember
Obviously,
last year, the Washington,
research.
they've only given us 2 blocks of Constitution Avenue now. It's almost a stroll around the block, and then up on top of Capitol Hill. So you can't even unwind the whole enormous crowd. And there's a reason for that, because the cameras used to pan all the way down Constitution Avenue, and they don't
all the
want
way
us
down
doing
to
that.
the monument.
From the Washington Monument, I remember seeing the White House while the speeches were going on, because that's across, going all the way up Constitution Avenue. It was a long march. And the Washington Post, I forget his name, the reporter last year said, "Oh, Nellie Gray's getting very old," and all those old March for Lifers.
Can't walk that far.
They can't totter up the hill. And the point is, Nellie Gray drives anyway. She is getting older, but boy, is she followed by thousands upon hundreds of thousands of young people. And they come from as far away as Kansas, Nebraska. It's just amazing.
It is really
They travel
amazing.
for 2 and 3 days to get there. And not only that, but they're going to masses beforehand. They're going to protest. They stay 2 and 3 days
I know.
now. The March for Life has turned into the Week for Life.
I know.
So it's just absolutely amazing, the enthusiasm that these people have and how informed they are. And then they go back and they go into their high schools. I took high school girls that had no opinion on it. They really weren't informed. I was teaching them religion class. They were Hispanic girls. And they were absolutely taken by the pictures of abortion that they said they'd never seen it before.
Yeah.
So they, the Genocide Awareness Project has these huge, gory, horrible pictures of abortion. She took every single one. She brought it back to her high school. The teachers were not happy about it. But she says, I have to tell the truth.
Yeah.
So I didn't tell her.
I mean, if you're not happy seeing these pictures, then why are you allowing it to happen in your country?
Well, the Genocide Awareness Project also has the hangings of the blacks that were going on. It also has the pictures of the Holocaust. And they said, and the whippings that were going on with the slaves and the child labor in the mines, and none of these horrific things stopped until we showed pictures.
True.
The American public is very aware of images.
Right.
So that's why I'm so committed as a media person to show the images of the March for Life. And people were so moved by seeing children with Down syndrome actually in the march that there's a couple that I'm going to interview for you, Dr. Neil Sloan. He's working on his doctorate at Catholic University, and his wife Melissa. They have 2 children. The youngest child is Gianna, and then there's Eddie. Eddie has Down syndrome, and Eddie changed their life. And we're going to show you a little clip about them. They've been our stalwarts. They started
from Silver Spring, Maryland. They're original members of the K.I.D.S group. Tell us about your beautiful children.
This is Eddie. He is turning 3 in 2 weeks, and he is a great big brother to his little sister, Gianna Marie, who is turning 1 this week.
Yes. And what prompted you to join K.I.D.S?
Well, having Eddie was a surprise to us, so I've always been involved in the pro-life movement, and we both have actually, and the march for years and years. And after having Eddie, I guess I never realized the attack on our children when they're in the movie. So it's been wonderful to kind of pick up this other piece. I felt really called to let people know how amazing he is and what an addition he's been to our life, our whole family, including parts that are not necessarily pro-life, but how he's touched each and every one of them. So he's really kind of been the inspiration for us to be a part of this.
Same here, same here.
That is wonderful.
It changes every mother in different ways, but many of us feel called to stand on a soapbox, like the Holy Father said, stand on the rooftops and exclaim to the world, these children are gifts. These children are exactly what we never knew we needed.
Right.
You know, a mother expressed to me today that God forms the virtues that we need in us through our children, and special needs children maybe are doing it in a little bit more of an extreme way than we have asked. For example, we need patience, they'll teach us patience. We need to speak out more, we will speak out more. We will definitely be the voice in the wilderness sometimes.
Right.
And even among Down syndrome groups, sometimes parents are being changed that were never pro-life before. It's a bit of a struggle for them. I've had certain other people in Down syndrome groups don't want to be openly pro-life, but I think their children are working a wonderful work in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what K.I.D.S hopes to do. The more we get our children in front of the camera and share them with the media, they're just going to fall in love with them, you know. So that's basically our job. The kids do the work for us, you know.
Yeah.
We just have to get them out there. Getting a child down to Washington is no easy feat, especially in that weather. You know, we really had to bundle up. But Christina, she didn't like being packed in the crowd because the policeman...
Who does? Because especially if you're short, I mean, that is...
You don't see a thing.
Scary, yeah.
And she's not in the stroller anymore.
And you're kind of being, like, moved along, you know.
Yeah, so we kind of walked on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I said, oh, look at the horsey over there. And we moved along. And then by the time we were going up Capitol Hill, we started to see people we knew, and she was happy.
Yeah.
And you always see friends that you know after a while.
It's amazing. It's amazing with all those people there. It's
You see people you
bizarre
haven't
how you run
seen
into them. I know.
that moved out of state, people you haven't seen in years.
Yeah.
And then it got a little cold, so we ducked into the Hyatt. We were happy to meet Abby Johnson, who was you were
Wow.
just talking about. That is the author of Unplanned, and she shared with me that the people that moved her the most were the ones outside praying. So every
Yeah.
time we pray outside an abortion clinic, I think maybe there's an Abby Johnson in there who's being moved right now, and I'm very happy about that. I put my arms around Mrs. Shivo, Mrs. Schindler, Terry Shivo's mom, and I said, you know what, when your daughter was being killed, I thought of my daughter, and I said, someday this could be my daughter, and
Yeah.
maybe I won't be around. Maybe someone will decide that her life doesn't have any meaning anymore.
Value, yeah.
So I said, we stood on the Supreme Court with a sign that said, Save Terry. It was 5 feet high. Christina was the toddler walking up and down the stairs. I was praying the rosary with a couple of friends of mine, and Gabriella was walking up and down the stairs to make sure she didn't trip. And a priest came by and said the rosary with us. And everybody else looked down when they saw us. But they knew exactly who we were talking about. So I said, your daughter is very much in my prayers. And I thank you for your valiance and what you put up
Tried
with.
to do, yeah.
And what you're still doing. They
Yeah.
still have a Terry Foundation, the Terry Schindler Shiva Foundation. And they're still doing the same kind of work that we're doing on the other end of the spectrum. So that was a real blessing to see them in the Hyatt as well, and to know that we weren't alone. So
Yeah.
I'd say the March for Life was a wonderful experience for my kids, for me, and I hope that the people that saw it on EWTN will be moved, and as well as the people that
It's
see
hard
us.
not to be, to see the millions of people. It's amazing.
If they see it,
Yeah.
they see it. And well, thanks to the new media, they are seeing it a little bit more. You know, we're getting out there, and we're getting our cameras out there. The Friars are doing it. We're doing it. Lots of bloggers are doing it. And we're showing the people the truth, that it's a young movement. It's growing. It's not going anywhere. In fact, it's growing like crazy. And now there's a huge movement in France. It's spreading to Europe. There was an Irish movement. Hey, well, the Irish don't have abortion yet, but they're under a lot of pressure from
so they're trying to keep
the European Union. So they have to fight. Because if they don't fight now, they'll end up like us fighting later. And we don't want that to happen to them. But a psychiatrist went to Ireland and saw so many children with Down syndrome. And he said, what's going on here? And then suddenly realized there's no abortion. So that's why that country is so blessed with children with Down syndrome. In fact, they have a cartoon called Punky. And Punky's Down syndrome. And she's a wonderful little girl, and she has a very happy life because there's no reason not to. They don't see any problem with it because nobody has told them. Well, I'm sure people have told them, but it hasn't sunk into the culture that these children should be rejected. So let's hope that someday we live in a place like Ireland where people with Down syndrome are enriching our lives in every way. And I'm not going to stop until it happens.
That's right.
And my daughter's going to do her best, too.
Well, it sounds like you had like a real fruitful adventure
I
down
think so.
in Washington,
I really
D.C.
think so.
Met up with some really interesting people.
And some really supportive people.
Yeah.
So. And the Legeune Foundation is going to do a lot of good. We're going to raise a lot of money. And let's see if we can improve the lives of people with Down syndrome to the point that when a mother's faced with a pregnancy with Down syndrome, she says, wait a minute, I know that person in my neighborhood, and they don't have such a bad life. And it takes away the fear.
Yeah.
And it says, there is a person I know who's very happy with Down syndrome. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
You know, it'll change your world. There's no doubt about it. But it's, you know, doesn't every child?
My mother-in-law, she got pregnant when she was 39 years old, and you know, my husband and his brother were much older already, and at that time they weren't doing genetic testing, but they were, you know, encouraging her to have an abortion because you know that your chances of having a Down syndrome
Just trying to
baby
scare
is really
her
good.
into
Exactly,
an abortion.
exactly. And her mother, who didn't say much, but her mother, wisely said, she says, if you're going to have a Down syndrome baby, it's only because God thinks you're special enough.
Oh.
And he only gives, those babies to special people. So you can handle it. And God wouldn't give his special kids to somebody who couldn't handle it.
Well, maybe we're not ready at the time, but he certainly gives us the grace by and by. He grows the grace in us, let's put it that way, because if you had told me that I was special and I was deserving of that grace, I would have said, no, 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 no. But he definitely gives us the grace by and by, because when I see the 70 and 80-year-old women with 40-year-old children with Down syndrome, I really see a saint. And I say to myself, no way could I be that saint. Yeah, but they weren't that saint 40 years ago.
When they started out.
It's a process, but he does give you the grace. And the point is that you have to trust. It's very important to trust. And it's very important to trust that any child that he gives you is a gift. And anything that you learn from your child is exactly what you need to get to heaven. Just as your spouse is what you need to get to heaven, your children are what you need to get to heaven. If your vocation is marriage, then everything that happens to you is for the good.
And that's the most important thing.
Yep.
And that's what we need to stress more and more, is that the whole reason we're here is to get to heaven. And so anything that God gives us is a gift towards that end.
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you've learned something. We hope that you talk to your family and friends about the things that you may have learned. And when you look in the mirror the next time, you realize yours too is the face of pro-life. Please join us again next time.